One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How many times have you recited those very words? How many times have you made that pledge? But is it truly one nation under God? When you have taken him out of almost every single public sector? Is it truly one nation under God when you have gone against pretty much laws that are written inside the Holy Bible? Or how about the fact when a woman exercises her rights of religion, to practice that religion and to have her beliefs, and she teaches those things to her children? You use it against her because she talks about witchcraft and sorcery, because she teaches her children how to pray, because she teaches her children about principalities and demons and demonic spirits, all these things that are listed in the Bible. You use it against her and say that she's mentally ill and schizophrenic and incapable of taking care of her children. You say all these things and fabricate things in a court of law. And this is allowed to be upheld in this court of law. And there's a judgment against her where she has her children removed from her, even though there's no evidence of a mental illness. There's no evidence. There's no mental health evaluation. There's no diagnosis. There's no prognosis. There's no damage or harm physically or emotionally to the children. In fact, when she first reported things that led up to these allegations, she was reporting the abuse that she was suffering, her and her children, that she was suffering at the hands of people who were sorcerers and witches. But we are not allowed to talk about those things, right? So this woman who is a single mother with 2 disabled children goes out of her way to protect her children, to protect them from harm, but yet it is allowed to be turned around against her. Her religious beliefs, her teachings to her children are allowed to be used against her, even though they've had no ill will towards her children all this time. They've gone nearly 13 and 16 years learning these same very principles, and they were fine until she presented these allegations. But this woman's rights were violated. She knows those violations, those rights were violated. But when she sought to get help, there was none. There's liberty and justice for all, but you pick and choose who you want to give liberty and justice to, right? When a woman cannot get anyone to stand up for blatant violations of her civil rights and her children's civil rights and disability rights, how is there liberty and justice for all? When you can use things against a woman to the point you keep her children from her permanently, when you refuse to return her children because she exercises her freedom of speech to make videos about all the injustice that are going on because she can't get anyone to represent her. She's reached out to many civil rights organizations, people who deem themselves as fighting against this. They're accredited to fight against these very things. Her civil rights, her wrongful termination of her civil rights, violation of her civil rights to practice her religious beliefs and teach her children. It's not causing any harm to anyone. She's teaching her children. But you use that against her and say that she's a neglectful parent, that she's not deemed capable of having her children. Yet she's had them all this time without any issues. But you use things against her that happened over 15, nearly 20 years ago when she was a young mother, teenage mom. And you're allowed to go back and use these things and state that because she was suffering from depression, which that young woman was responsible enough to get the help at that time and admit that she was suffering from depression. She was voluntarily put into a mental institution for 3 days, a behavioral health clinic where she got help for herself. So if that woman was rational enough to make those decisions when she knew that she was suffering from something, because she was overwhelmed, a single mother dealing with 2 special needs children and trying to work and go to school at that same time. And she felt depressed at that moment. She felt depressed during that time, but she was able to go to a counselor and a therapist and admit this and voluntarily seek help so that she can better herself or her children. But that same woman, now years later, you're saying is incapable of knowing that there's something wrong with her when she's telling you that there isn't an issue. The only issue was that she was being antagonized and targeted. But you don't investigate the perpetrator that she's accused of these allegations. Instead, you deem her incapable of taking care of her children, that she has a mental illness, which you have never given her a diagnosis for. Matter of fact, there was never even a diagnosis till after you'd taken her children, 2 months after you've taken her children. And there's no one to stand up for this woman's help. And since her children have been in foster care, they've actually declined. They've actually had worse things happen to them than happened to them when they were in their parents' care. Her daughter is now obese. Her daughter, who is only 4'11", at 16 years old, she was obese. And when she made claims about this, no one said anything. This was allowed to be covered up. Now her daughter is 18 years old, a young woman weighing over 172 pounds, has diabetes, is morbidly obese. But is this talked about in a court of law, a law of justice? When this child was at home with her mother, she was not obese. Yet you said that her mother was a neglectful parent. Her son, who has been taken out of the home, is sitting and has been transferred from group home to group home and in the custody of the same child care system that took him out of the home and said that he was not, able to have his best interest cared for under the discretion of his parent, his biological mother. He's been able to get a felony while in that same custody of that organization that removed him from his home. He has faced all types of emotional problems and trauma, has been, exposed to, gang violence and other behavior that he was not exposed to while he was living at home with his mother. But since you have taken him out of the home and kept him, he has been switched from group home to group home. He has alleged that he has been shot while in foster care. He has undergone issues where he has threatened to harm himself. And when we have group therapy and talk about all these things, you don't express the rights of the parent. You don't tell them that you're going to divulge all this information and use it against them, because all this mother wants to do is speak out for the rights of her child. But every time she does, you penalize her for it. You penalize her for speaking out about all the things that are happening in foster care, all the things that's been covered up, because she can't get anyone to advocate for her or help her speak out. But you use it against her and say, oh, well, since you're making videos, we maybe need to reevaluate the permanency plan. Instead of reunification, we're going to put your child in some permanency thing where she doesn't come home. Now we get to keep her. But yet while that child was kept in this permanency plan, she had lost her virginity while being left unattended in a home. But we don't talk about that. Like I said, she's been morbidly obese. She now has borderline diabetes, or diabetes, could be diabetes at this point, because she has a bracelet. She's taking medication. She's taking metformin, things that were not happening while she was in care of her mom. But when her mother brings this out and speaks about it, you want to retaliate against her. You want to get upset. But there's no one that will speak up for the rights of this mother and her children. When her son is being antagonized and sitting in a rehabilitation center that's supposed to be there to treat him, but he's more treated like someone who's in a detention center, someone who has a violent criminal history, even though he never had a criminal record until he was in foster care. He was placed in a foster care home, even though they stated that his mental health was so severe to the point he needed to be monitored. And all these things happen where the caseworker can say, oh, well, it's not best that he talks to his mother. So this child is in this group home and runs away, is able to just walk out of that group home, wandering around on the street, and ends up entering someone's home because he has impulsive behavior. He's always been impulsive since he was a little boy. But has he gotten proper diagnosis? We don't know. Has he been able to get the proper treatment for that? But yet, now that he's walked into this home, they committed him a burglary, he has a felony, is on probation, and now sitting inside a rehabilitation center where he is being treated like a criminal. Where for every little offense, every minor thing, a breaking of a rule, you solve it by, what? Locking him up, getting him a shutdown, removing all of his privileges from him. And when you talk about this, when the mother speaks out to advocate during therapy sessions, the therapist breaks confidentiality between that client and the mother who's attending this therapy session, and goes back and tells the caseworker things that are said and uses that against the child now and the parent, and cut their visits. So you retaliate by cutting the visits, even though that's not in the best interest of the child, because you already stated that the benefits are something that are beneficial, that they actually enjoy the visits. You said that you see that they're acting better based off the visits with their parents, but because you now feel that the parent is speaking up for the rights of their child, you want to retaliate by stopping these visits, something that's not in the best interest of that child. But you as a therapist are supposed to act out in the best interest of the child, but all these violations are happening. The mother has now been stopped from seeing her daughter as well, based off of the fact that every time her daughter goes to see her, she wants to come home because she misses her family. She's 18 years old and being kept against her will. Now she's not allowed to even see her family in person. She's not allowed to even have visits with them based off of something, her behavior, that you're blaming it out on her visits with her mother. But we don't know that for fact. We don't know because the child has other disabilities. She has other issues. She's taken a myriad of medications. So it's like this mother is facing all these things that are happening to her and her family. There's no one to stand up for her. Yet someone can get punched by a police in the face at a McDonald's and they get exposure. A woman can glue her own hair with some Gorilla Glue, and that gets exposure, and people actually donate for them and speak out and help them. But this woman who there's liberty and justice for all, she's not getting liberty and justice. She's just getting violated against every day. She's getting penalized and retaliated against because no one's helping her. Her children are in this situation where it's unfair and they're not being treated properly, but yet every time she voices her opinion and makes a video, because this is the only way she knows how to speak out, because every time she reaches out to any organization or any news station, they say they can't help her or they don't even respond. And things are continuing to allow to be brushed up, yet this is liberty and justice for all. You say you're one nation under God. You think God approves of this? You think God approves of the rights of his people being violated when you discriminate against someone based off of their religion? When you can label someone as having a mental illness and use it against them to the point you take their children from them and violate every single right that they have? When you don't represent the poor properly, they're underrepresented because they don't have money and they can't get a job. Because why? Because you're blackball them. Because no one will hire them, right? If they've done something to offend you or they've spoken out about something, even though they have credentials and licenses and skills, you won't hire them. Or if you do hire them, they're antagonized on the job. Ask yourself, is this something that a nation under God should be doing? And is this something that how you should be operating? See, I know God and I read the Bible. And the attributes that are displayed in that Bible goes against all of these things. How is there justice when children are suffering and nothing's being done about it? How can someone have adequate education when you're taking them away? When you're taking them away from their families? And it's something that it is affecting them. It is affecting them when you take a child out of the home and separate from his mother at 13 years old and you're still holding him to this day. When he's allowed to come home, you say he came home, but the mother did not continue the counseling and sessions. Well, how about this? How about when the mother did take her child to the counseling sessions? She did. She took her child to a counseling session. A place called Project Live. Her son thrived there. He enjoyed it. He was actually engaged in golf. He learned how to make his own pizza from scratch. It was something that he was enjoying. And then while he was there, he was told that, he could have virtual sessions or he can have in-person sessions, whatever is convenient for him, that can accommodate him. But, after the therapist that he's seeing at this place speaks to the caseworker, suddenly she's changing. She no longer wants these telehealth sessions because suddenly they're not working. Suddenly the child it's not beneficial for the child. Suddenly, it's not working for him, but this child was actually going to school. And he had other programs and activities that he was trying to get to. So telehealth was more convenient for him at the time, even though he had in-person sessions. But this person decided that they no longer wanted to have telehealth sessions for him. This wasn't helpful. Even though it's still offered for other people, still the same thing. You're still talking in person with this counselor. So I don't know how it's different in person and telehealth, but they stated that telehealth was not beneficial. And so all of a sudden, this poor mother, her car breaks down. She's using this car to get back and forth to work. This car breaks down. Her car was her only source of income. Now that the car is not working, she has no means of getting back and forth to work. Is there anyone to stand in and help her with that? No. No one offers any services. They never offer services, but they come in and condemn. And so as a result, she tells this therapist that, hey, I can't get there because we don't have a vehicle. We don't have a working vehicle. So they refuse to work with us. Because of that, you have to be here in person. It's cold outside. But you say, I'm a neglectful parent. You say, you should be able to take your child on a bus. He's asthmatic. It's cold and it's the middle of COVID, but we should be on the bus in the winter time. Instead of you just working with us and allowing us to have telehealth sessions. But then you condemn the mother and say, she didn't keep up with her son's therapy. When you put off all these hindrances and obstacles and do not try to alleviate the burdens, but instead you keep creating burdens, does that sound like a conspiracy? Does it sound like you want someone to thrive and you're trying to help them and do everything that's in their best interest and benefit?